Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's great to be here.
Usually when we dive into a classic text on this show, we like to start with something a bit more approachable, maybe a novel or a collection of essays, something where you can just sort of ease into the shallow end of the pool. But today
is not that.
Today we are not doing that.
Yeah.
Today we are looking at a professional philosophy text that, and this is not an exaggeration, essentially claims to be the user manual for the human mind.
It's certainly ambitious, and let's be frank, it's not for the faint of heart.
We are talking about Immanuel Kant, specifically his book with the incredibly catchy roll-off-the-tongue title, Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics.
A title only a German philosopher from the 18th century could love, right?
Exactly. And I think for a lot of people, and I'll include myself here, that word metaphysics, it just acts like a giant do not enter sign. It feels like this confusing, dense battlefield of abstract ideas where nothing ever really gets solved. It's the smoke and mirrors department of philosophy, where people argue about ghosts and the meaning of the word is.
And you know what's funny? That's exactly why this book exists. Kant actually agrees with you. He looks at the state of metaphysics in his time, we're talking the late 1700s here, and he sees a complete disaster.
He does.
Oh yeah, he sees it as a battlefield where people are just, shouting at each other without any standard weights or measures to decide who's right. He essentially says that metaphysics has become a place where you can say whatever you want because no one can actually prove you wrong.
So what's the mission here? Because this isn't his biggest book. This isn't the giant doorstop that everyone talks about, but nobody's actually read.
No, this is the guide. This is the trailer for the movie. The mission of the Prolegomena is to explore a text that claims to be the key to solving philosophy's biggest problems. And we're talking about the heavy hitters here.
God, the soul,
the nature of the universe. But Kant believes that before we can even attempt to answer those huge questions, we have to answer a much more fundamental one. Is metaphysics even possible as a science?
Wow. That feels like a brutal question to ask your own field of study. Is this thing I do for a living even real?
It is brutal, but he's being deadly serious. He's asking, can we actually know anything about these topics, or are we just guessing? Is metaphysics a legitimate branch of knowledge, like physics or math, or is it just sophisticated daydreaming?
So let's get into the origin story here. Why did he write this specific book?
Because he had already written his massive masterpiece, The Critique of Pure Reason, right? That was supposed to be the big system.
He had. He spent over a decade writing the critique. I mean, he poured his entire soul into it. It was supposed to be the book that changed everything in philosophy. When it was finally published, silence.
Crickets.
Worse than crickets. When people finally did review it, they completely catastrophically misunderstood it. Oh, that's relatable. You work on a project for 10 years and the first comment is just, I don't get it.
It was heartbreaking for him, truly. The critique was published, and the few critics who bothered with it were just skimming it. They were looking at the surface level arguments, getting bogged down in his, let's be honest, very dense terminology, and just missing the revolutionary system he was building underneath.
What were they saying?
They complained it was too dry, too obscure, too long-winded. They essentially said, this is unreadable nonsense. And, even worse, they accused him of just being a rehash of Bishop Berkeley, the idealist who said things only exist in the mind.
So the Prolegomena is basically Kant, fed up and saying, okay, you didn't get it the first time. You were too lazy to read the big book. Let me break it down for you in small words.
That is precisely it. He describes the Prolegomena as a preparatory exercise. If the critique is the full, complex architectural blueprint of the system, this book is the sketch plan. It's designed to show why the system is necessary in the first place. And honestly, there's a bit of an edge to it.
An edge? You mean he's angry?
Oh, yes. It's a polemic. You can feel Kant's frustration just dripping from the page. He is annoyed with critics who, as he says, skim rather than think. He wants to force the reader to actually grapple with the core problem instead of just critiquing his writing style. He's basically grabbing the reader by the lapels and saying, look, we have a crisis here and you are all ignoring it.
I have to say, I love a frustrated philosopher. It gives the text an energy that you don't usually get in these, dusty old treatises.
It really does.
Now, to understand why he's so worked up, we have to talk about the thing that started it all. He has this famous line about being interrupted from his dogmatic slumber.
The dogmatic slumber. It's one of the most famous phrases in the entire history of philosophy.
And the alarm clock that woke him up was a Scottish guy named David Hume.
David Hume, the catalyst, the great skeptic.
So let's slow down and really look at this because it's so important. What did Hume do? How did he manage to upset the apple cart so badly that Kant had to rethink his entire worldview?
Hume attacked the very foundation of how we think the world works. I mean, the absolute bedrock. He went after the concept of cause and effect.
Okay, let's unpack this because cause and effect seems pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
I drop a scone, it falls, the sun comes out, the stone gets warm, I strike a match, it lights, cause effect. It feels like the most basic thing in the world.
It does feel basic. And for centuries, philosophers just assumed that this connection was logical. They thought that if you fully understood the concept of fire, you would logically understand that it burns, that the effect was somehow contained in the cause, just like the concept of a triangle contains the idea of three sides.
Right, it's just how the world works, it's built in.
But Hume looked closer. Much closer. And he argued that reason, pure logic, cannot find any necessary connection between a cause and an effect. He says, look at a billiard ball moving toward another billiard ball. You expect the second one to move when it's hit. But why?
Because of momentum. Because it always happens.
Because it always happens. That's the key. That's Hume's point. He says you can stare at the concept of a moving ball for 1,000 years, and pure logic will never, ever tell you that it should move another ball. Logically, it could just as easily pass right through it, or stop dead, or turn into a frog.
Turn into a frog.
There's no logical contradiction in any of those outcomes. The only reason we expect it to move the other ball is because we've seen it happen before 1,000 times.
So he's saying we only know it happens because we've observed it happening over and over again.
Exactly. Hume argued that what we call cause and effect is just habit. It's custom. We see A happen, then we see B happen. We see it 100 times, 1,000 times. Our brains create an association. We expect B to follow A, but there is no logical thread, no invisible string tying them together. It's just a psychological trick our minds play on us.
Hey, wait a second. If I hold a pen in the air and let go, it has to fall. It can't just float up. That feels like a law of nature, not just a habit I've developed.
Hume would say, you only feel that way because you've never ever seen it float up. But you can't prove it must fall using pure reason. You can only say it has fallen every single time so far. You're making an assumption about the future based on the past.
That is actually incredibly unsettling.
It's terrifying because if Hume is right, then we don't actually know anything for certain about the laws of nature. It's just a subjective habit of the mind. Tomorrow, the sun might not rise, the pen might float, water might burn, and we would have no logical reason to say that's impossible. We could only say, well, that's surprising.
And that's what woke Kant up.
It panicked him. He read Hume and he realized that if Hume was right, all of metaphysics and even science itself was completely impossible. If we can't rely on cause and effect as a necessary law, then science is just a collection of random observations with no glue holding them together. We don't have knowledge, we just have expectations.
So Kant's goal here is basically a rescue mission for reason itself.
Yes, 100%. He wants to save reason. He sees himself as fighting a war on two fronts. On one side, he wants to save reason from skepticism, which is the belief that we can't really know anything for certain, which is where Hume leads you.
And the other side.
On the other side, he wants to avoid dogmatism, which is believing things without any proof at all, just because they sound nice or because Aristotle said so.
So he needs to find some middle path, a way to prove that we can know things for certain, that the pen must fall, but without just blindly asserting it.
Correct. And to do that, he realizes he has to take a step back. He has to open up the toolbox and look at how human judgment actually works. He needs to find a new way to explain how we know what we know.
Okay, this brings us to the toolbox section of our deep dive. Kant starts throwing around some terminology that we really need to get a handle on. It sounds technical, but it's actually really useful for clear thinking. He starts distinguishing between different kinds of judgments we make.
This distinction is absolutely crucial. If you get this, you get the key to the entire book. He divides all the statements we can make into two types based on their structure: analytic and synthetic.
Okay, let's define analytic first. What does he mean by that?
An analytic judgment is explicative. That's his word for it. It means the predicate, the description you're giving, is already hidden inside the subject you're talking about. The classic example he uses is, all bodies are extended.
Extended meaning they take up space.
Right. Think about the concept of a physical body or an object. Can you even imagine an object that doesn't take up space?
No, of course not. If it didn't take up space, it wouldn't be a body. It'd be a ghost or an idea or something.
Exactly. So when I say all bodies take up space, I'm not teaching you anything new about the world. I'm just unpacking the suitcase of the word body and showing you what was already inside. I don't need to go out into the world and measure a rock to know it takes up space. I know it just by definition.
So, analytic judgments are safe. They're logically true because to deny them would be a contradiction.
They're completely safe, they're certain, but they're also limited. They rely on the law of contradiction. But here's the catch. They teach us nothing new about reality. They just clarify what we already know from our concepts.
Okay, so that's analytic. Clean, simple, but doesn't expand our knowledge. Then we have synthetic.
Synthetic judgments are expansive. They add new information to a concept, something that wasn't already in the definition. For example, all bodies have weight.
Wait, hold on. Isn't weight part of the definition of a body? If I have a rock, it has weight. That seems pretty definitional to me.
Kant argues no. The concept of body just implies extension taking up space and having a shade. But weight is a force, a relation to gravity. To know that this body is heavy, you have to actually interact with it in the world. You have to lift it. You are adding the new concept of weight to the concept of body.
I see. Or like if I say the candle is red. The concept of candle doesn't include red. I have to actually look at it and see its color.
That's a perfect example. Gold is a yellow metal. Kant would say metal might be analytic, but yellow. That comes from experience. You have to see it. These are synthetic judgments. They bind two different concepts together to create new knowledge.
Okay, so usually synthetic judgments require experience. I have to go out into the world and check things.
Exactly. And that type of knowledge, the knowledge from experience, we call a posteriori. But here is the big problem. Here is the central mystery that drives the whole book.
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Okay, so we have analytic judgments, which are a priori. They're universally true. They're logical, but they don't tell us anything new. And then we have synthetic judgments, which are a posteriori. They tell us new things, but they're only true based on specific experiences, which means they aren't necessarily universal.
Right. The classic example is all swans are white. That's a synthetic statement. It adds the property white to swan. But then we went to Australia and found black swans, and the whole rule broke.
Exactly. That's the problem with knowledge from experience. It can always surprise you. But Kant asks the killer question. Is there a third way? Can we have a judgment that is synthetic a priori?
Synthetic a priori. Okay, let me try to get my head around this. That would mean knowing something genuinely new, adding new information, but knowing it with the certainty of logic, knowing it universally and necessarily without having to check every single experience in the universe.
That is the golden ticket. That is the holy grail of philosophy. Kant says metaphysics as a science stands or falls on this single question. How are synthetic propositions a priori possible?
But that sounds like magic. How can I possibly know something new about the world without looking at the world? That sounds like clairvoyance or something.
It does, doesn't it? If I told you I know exactly what is inside a locked room without ever looking, you'd call me a magician or a liar. But Kant says we do this all the time.
We do.
He says if we can't answer this question, then metaphysics is, and I'm quoting him here, just shallow talk and foam floating on the surface. If we can't prove that we can know new universal truths without checking every corner of the universe, then we can't say anything meaningful about God or the soul or the nature of the cosmos.
So his whole project depends on proving these synthetic a priori judgments actually exist. And he starts in a place that I think most people would find very surprising. He doesn't start with God or the soul. He starts with math.
Yes, pure mathematics.
Now, I think most people, myself included, would assume math is analytic. 2 + 2 = 4. That just seems like it's a definition, right? 4 is just another name for 2 + 2.
That's what many philosophers, including Hume, thought. They thought math was just a big, elaborate tautology. But Kant challenges this. He says, look closely at a simple equation like 7 + 5 = 12.
Okay, 7 + 5 = 12. Seems analytic to me.
Kant argues that the concept of 12 is not actually hidden inside the concept of the sum of 7 and 5.
It's not. It really feels like it is.
Think about it this way. Think about really big numbers. If I say the sum of 34,592 and 12,401, is the answer immediately present in your mind just by understanding the definitions of those numbers?
No. Not at all. I have to do the math. I have to, do the calculation.
Exactly. You have to construct the answer. Kant says 7 and 5 are just two concepts. To get to the concept 12, you have to perform an action. You need an intuition. You need to actually count, maybe on your fingers, or visualize 5 points being added to 7 points. You are adding something new to the concept of 7 and 5 to get a result. It is synthetic.
Okay, I think I can see that. It's a process of synthesis. I'm building the number 12 out of the parts, not just defining it. So math adds new information. It's not just unpacking definitions.
Right.
But math is also universal. It's a priori. 7 plus 5 is 12 everywhere, always. It's 12 on Mars. It's 12 in a black hole. It has to be.
Exactly. So math is a real-world example of synthetic a priori knowledge. It exists. It's the proof of concept. It shows that we can know universal truths that also add new information. But now, the really hard question. How is it possible? How can we know these mathematical truths about the entire universe before we even look at the universe? How do I know that if I go to a galaxy a billion light years away, a triangle will still have 180 degrees?
Yeah, how do we know the universe doesn't get weird out there?
Yeah.
That the rules don't change?
Kant's answer involves a radical, complete rethinking of space and time. This is where the trip really begins.
Hit me.
Kant claims that space and time are not things out there in the universe. They are not objects. They are not empty boxes that God put things inside, which is what Newton thought.
Wait. Space isn't a thing. It's not the stage that the universe plays out on. The final frontier.
Nope. Kant says space and time are the forms of sensibility.
Forms of sensibility. Okay, that sounds very abstract. Let's use an analogy. In the outline, we talked about rose-colored glasses.
Right, that's the perfect analogy. Imagine you are born wearing a pair of rose-colored glasses that are surgically, permanently attached to your face. You can never take them off.
Okay, so my entire world is permanently pink.
Everything you see, trees, mountains, people, everything looks pink. Now, you can make a prediction with absolute 100% certainty. Any object I see in the future will be pink.
Yeah, but not because the objects are actually pink.
Exactly. You know this with certainty because you are bringing the pinkness to the interaction. The pinkness is in your sensory apparatus, not in the thing in itself.
Okay, I'm with you. So how does this apply to space and time?
Kant says space and time are like those glasses. We can't see the world except through the lens of space and time. They are the pre-installed software our minds use to process any and all sensory data. We don't perceive things in space. We perceive things spatially. We don't experience events in time. We experience them temporally.
So the reason we can be so sure that the world will always obey the laws of geometry, that triangles will have 180 degrees, that space will have 3 dimensions, is because our minds impose that geometry onto the world before we even process it.
That's it. We bring the geometry with us. We are stamping the world with space and time before we even become conscious of it.
That is wild. It basically means we aren't looking at the world as it is. We are looking at a user interface that our brain generates.
That's a perfect modern analogy. Space and time are the GUI, the graphical user interface of the human mind. We don't see the underlying code of reality. We just see the icons and the windows that our mind renders for us.
To prove this, Kant brings up a really specific, almost weird little example, the hand paradox, or as he calls it, incongruent counterparts.
Yes, this is a brilliant little puzzle. It's so simple and so powerful. Picture a left hand and a right hand, or, as the text also mentions, symmetric helices like 2 snail shells that spiral in opposite directions.
Okay, I'm picturing 2 hands, just disembodied floating hands. Now, mathematically, in terms of their internal dimensions, the length of the fingers, the width of the palm, the ratio of the thumb to the pinky, they are absolutely identical. If you wrote down a list of all the measurements of the left hand and the right hand, the list would be exactly the same.
Sure, they're perfect mirror images of each other.
And yet they are not the same. You cannot substitute one for the other. A left glove does not fit a right hand. If you were a surgeon and you had to reattach a patient's left hand, a right hand just wouldn't work.
True. Try shaking hands with your left hand. It gets awkward very fast.
So Kant analyzes this and asks, why? If space were just a concept, just a set of relationships between the parts of an object, then these 2 hands would be identical because all their parts relate to each other in the exact same way. But they aren't. He says the difference is internal, yet it's only visible through its relation to space as a whole.
What does that mean, relation to space as a whole? It means space isn't just an idea we have. It's a form of intuition. It's a framework we orient ourselves within. The leftness or rightness of a hand isn't a measurement you can find within the hand itself. It's about how the hand as a whole fits into the absolute space our minds project. This proves space is something we bring to the table. We feel space intuitively.
This all leads us to a word that often confuses people. Idealism. Kant calls himself an idealist, but he's very, very specific about what kind he is. Because when I hear idealist, I think of someone like Bishop Berkeley saying, there is no spoon. Everything is just an idea in the mind of God.
He is extremely careful here, and this is where his first critics got him so wrong. He is not a Berkeleyan idealist. He isn't saying the world is an illusion, only my mind exists. He's not saying the table in front of you isn't real.
Okay, good. So the table is real, it's solid. If I kick it, it's going to hurt.
Yes. But he makes a crucial distinction between phenomena and noumena.
Okay, let's unpack those terms. They sound heavy.
They do, but the idea is fairly straightforward. Phenomena are things as they appear to us. The table as I see it, feel it, measure it, this is real, but it's the table that has been filtered through our space-time glasses. It is the table for us.
And noumena?
Noumena are things in themselves. The table as it exists independently of my seeing it. The table as it is when no one is watching, stripped of space, stripped of time, stripped of color. The raw data of reality.
And his point is, we can never, ever know the noumena.
Never. We can never take the glasses off. We are locked into our own user interface. We can only ever know the appearance. He uses a beautiful analogy of a rainbow.
A rainbow. That's poetic.
We see the colors of the rainbow in the sky. That is the appearance, the phenomena. We know it's caused by raindrops and sunlight and the physics of light refraction, the reality. But we don't confuse the rainbow itself for the rain. The rainbow is what happens when the rain interacts with our eyes from a certain perspective.
I see.
In Kant's view, the whole physical world, tables, chairs, stars, atoms, is like that rainbow. It's the appearance that is created when the thing in itself interacts with our mind's structure.
So that's what he means by critical idealism. We know the appearance is real, the rainbow is really there, you can photograph it, but we have to remain critical and admit there's a reality behind it that we just can't access directly.
Precisely. And once he has established that math is possible because we provide the space and time, he moves on to the next big hurdle, physics.
Okay, so we've solved math. We know why geometry works everywhere. But what about natural science? What about cause and effect, the very thing Hume blew up?
This is part 3 of the deep dive, pure natural science.
And just to remind everyone, Hume said we can't find laws like cause and effect in our experience. He said we just see event A and then event B. We never see the invisible string connecting them.
And here's the shocker. Kant agrees with Hume. He says Hume was absolutely right on this point. We don't find the laws in the objects. You can look at a fire for 1,000 years and you will never see a cause particle.
So, how does he save science then? If he agrees with Hume, isn't he stuck?
This is the moment of his famous Copernican revolution in philosophy. Copernicus, the astronomer, showed us that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. It was a complete reversal of perspective. Kant does the same for knowledge, he says. We have always assumed our knowledge must conform to objects.
Right, that we look at the world and our mind makes a copy of it.
But he says, what if we reverse it? What if objects must conform to our knowledge? And then he drops the bombshell. The understanding prescribes laws to nature.
Whoa. Say that again. That sounds like I'm a god.
The understanding prescribes laws to nature. We don't read the laws out of the book of nature. We write the laws into the book of nature.
So my mind is, it's legislating the universe.
Yeah. In a very specific sense, yes. Not the specific details. Your mind doesn't decide that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. You have to go out and discover that through experiment. But your mind legislates the structure. Your mind decides that everything that happens must have a cause. That is a rule your mind imposes on the chaos of sensory data to make it make sense.
He breaks this down with a mechanism, right? He talked about the difference between perception and experience.
Yes, this is key. He distinguishes judgments of perception from judgments of experience.
Give me a concrete example to make that clear.
A judgment of perception is purely subjective. The room feels warm to me, or when I hold this stone in the sun, I feel it get hot. That is valid only for me right now. It's just a report of my senses. It's like a diary entry. First this happened, then that happened.
Okay, I feel warm. Simple enough.
But a judgment of experience is objective. It makes a universal claim. The air is elastic, or the sun warms the stone. The word warms implies a causal law. This statement claims validity for everyone, always. It's a scientific statement. It's a law.
So what's the magic ingredient? What turns the subjective, I feel warm, into the objective, the sun warms the stone?
The addition of a pure concept of the understanding, which is a term he uses for what he calls the categories.
The category.
These are the fundamental logical concepts that are hardwired into our brains. Concepts like cause and effect, substance and accident, necessity, possibility. When you take the raw data of your perception, sunshine, the stone gets hot, and you stamp it with the category of cause, you transform it into an objective experience. The sun causes the stone to get warm.
So the category is the glue that Hume couldn't find.
It's the connective tissue of reality as we know it. Without these categories, our experience would just be, as William James later put it, a blooming, buzzing confusion, a kaleidoscope of flashing lights and random feelings. It wouldn't be a world, it wouldn't be nature. Kant argues that we construct nature, the interconnected web of appearances under law, by applying these rules to our perceptions.
Okay, let me try to summarize this so far, because it's a lot. We, our minds, provide the space and time, which are the forms of sensibility. That's what makes math possible.
Correct.
Then we provide the categories, like cause and effect, which are the concepts of the understanding. And that's what makes natural science possible.
You've got it.
We know the world will obey these laws because we are the ones enforcing them on our own experience. We are the architects of the world we perceive.
That's the core of the Copernican revolution.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting for me. What happens when we try to use these tools, these categories, on things that aren't in our experience? What happens when we try to use the cause stamp on God or try to measure the substance of the soul?
Now we enter the danger zone. This is part 4, metaphysics and the limits of reason.
Because the whole book is called Prolegomena to Metaphysics. We've solved math, we've solved physics. But what about the big stuff? God, freedom, immortality.
This is where Kant draws a hard, bright line. And to do it, he has to make another crucial distinction. The difference between the understanding and reason.
I thought they were basically the same thing.
Not for Kant. The understanding is the faculty that deals with experience. It's the builder. It works with the bricks and mortar of sensory data, sights, sounds, smells, and uses the categories to build a stable house of knowledge. Reason, however, is ambitious. Reason is the architect who sees the house and asks, what about the whole city? It wants to go beyond experience. It wants the unconditioned.
The unconditioned, meaning the thing that doesn't depend on anything else. The ultimate explanation.
Think about it. If you see a change, your understanding asks for the cause. You find the cause. Then reason, by its very nature, asks, well, what caused that cause? And what caused the cause of the cause? Reason naturally wants to find the first cause, the beginning of everything, the total explanation.
It wants to complete the series. It hates loose ends.
Exactly. But the problem is the first cause, or the whole universe, or the immortal soul, these things are never given in our experience. You can't see them. You can't put the soul under a microscope. You can't see the Big Bang directly. These are ideas, not objects.
So when reason tries to apply the categories, like cause or substance, to these ideas that are outside of experience,
it creates an illusion. Kant calls this the transcendent illusion of reason. We confuse an idea, which is a useful goal for our thought, with an object, a real thing we can actually know. We start hallucinating logic. We start building castles in the sky.
He breaks this down into the famous antinomies. And this part really blew my mind when I first read it, because usually in philosophy you have a thesis and you argue for it. But here, Kant argues against himself and wins both times.
The antinomies are the spectacular conflict of reason with itself. Kant shows that when you try to theorize about the universe as a whole from a God's eye view, you can prove two completely opposite things with equal logical certainty, and it's absolutely maddening.
Okay, let's play this out. I'll take the thesis side. You take the antithesis. Let's look at the origin of the world. My turn. Thesis. The world has a beginning in time. And my argument is, if the world didn't have a beginning, then an infinite amount of time must have passed before right now. But an infinite series, by definition, can never be completed. You can't reach the end of infinity. So we could never have arrived at today. Therefore, the world must have had a beginning. Checkmate.
That sounds incredibly logical, airtight even. But here's the antithesis. The world has no beginning. It is infinite in the past. And my argument is, if the world had a beginning, then there must have been a time before the world existed, a void time. But in a complete void, there is nothing. Why would the world suddenly start then and not a moment later or a moment earlier? There's no reason for it. Nothing can come from nothing. Therefore, the world must have always existed.
Which is also incredibly illogical. So what's going on?
Right, and they directly contradict each other. One must be wrong, but both proofs seem perfect.
Let's do another one. Let's talk about what matter is made of.
Everything in the world consists of simple, indivisible parts, atoms. My argument is, if things aren't made of simple parts, then everything is just a composite. But if you take away the composition, if you keep dividing, eventually nothing would be left. So there must be fundamental building blocks, atoms, that are the base of reality.
Seems reasonable. But, antithesis, there are no simple parts. Everything is infinitely divisible. My argument is, any piece of matter, no matter how small, takes up space. But space, as we know from geometry, is infinitely divisible. You can always cut a distance in half, and then in half again forever. Therefore, any part of matter that occupies space can also be cut in half. So there are no simple indivisible atoms. Everything can be split forever.
This is the dogmatic slumber nightmare, isn't it? This is reason eating its own tail. If reason can prove two opposite things are true, how can we possibly trust it? It feels like the whole system is crashing.
That is precisely why the antinomies are so important. They are the warning signs. They show us we are doing something fundamentally wrong. We are flying outside of our designated airspace. We are trying to apply categories like beginning or simple part to things that aren't objects of our experience.
So what's the solution? Does he pick a winner in these debates?
No. He dissolved the court. He says the whole trial is illegitimate. And he splits the antinomies into two groups to solve them. For the first two, the mathematical ones, about the size of the world and the division of matter, he says, both sides are false.
Both are false, but one has to be right. Either the world had a beginning or it didn't. It's one or the other.
Kant says, no, because both sides make the same mistake. They assume the world is a thing in itself that is sitting out there complete, waiting to be measured. But remember his idealism. The world is just the ongoing series of our appearances. It doesn't exist apart from our experience of it. So it's not infinite and it's not finite. It's just the indefinite process of us experiencing it. The question itself assumes the world is a finished object, and it isn't.
Okay, so the question is just a bad question. It's like asking, what is north of the North Pole? The question doesn't make sense.
Exactly. But now for the last two, the dynamical antinomies, the ones about freedom versus nature and a necessary being, he says something even more surprising. Both sides can be true.
Both can be true. How can there be freedom and universal natural law? That seems like the biggest contradiction of all. One says I'm free, the other says I'm a puppet of physics.
This is the genius and the payoff of his distinction between phenomena and noumena. Let's take the freedom antinomy.
There is freedom. I can choose to lift my arm. I can start a new chain of events out of nowhere.
Everything is nature and necessity. Physics determines that my arm will move based on prior causes.
In the world of appearance, phenomena, everything is determined. Your brain is made of atoms. Those atoms obey the laws of physics. If I were a super scientist and could look at your brain, I would see neurons firing in a perfect, predictable chain reaction. From that perspective, you are a machine. The antithesis is correct.
Okay. I don't love being called a machine, but I follow the science.
But, he says, in the world of things in themselves, noumena, you can be free. The you that exists behind the appearance, the you that is doing the thinking, the self, isn't bound by the laws of time and space. Why? Because time and space are just the glasses. They only apply to appearances. The thesis can be correct in a different realm.
So science gets to study my body as a determined object, and morality gets to treat myself as a free soul.
Essentially, yes. This allows science and morality to coexist in their own separate domains without destroying each other. To the scientist observing you from the outside, you are determined. To yourself, as a moral agent acting from the inside, you are a free agent. Both are valid perspectives on different layers of reality.
That is a very neat trick. It resolves the tension by putting a wall between the two worlds.
It's the only way he sees to save both. If you only have science, you destroy freedom and morality. If you only have a belief in freedom that violates science, you destroy knowledge. Kant finds a way to save both by separating them.
This leads us, finally, to the last big idea, God. We've talked about the soul, an illusion of reason, the world, an antinomy. What about God?
Well, Kant has already destroyed all the traditional proofs for God's existence. You can't prove God exists like you prove a table exists, because God isn't an object in space and time. You can't find God with a telescope or a particle accelerator.
So is he an atheist then? It sounds like he is.
No, not at all. He says that while we can't know God exists as an object, we must think the idea of God for a specific purpose.
Why? If we can't know it, why do we have to think it?
Because reason needs it as a regulatory principle. We need the idea of a supreme being to organize our knowledge of the world as a unified, systematic whole. We look at nature and we see incredible order, purpose, and interconnectedness. It is helpful, even necessary for science to look at that order as if it were designed by a supreme intelligence.
As if. That's the key phrase, isn't it? It's a heuristic. It's a useful tool for thinking, not a statement of fact.
Yes. This is his distinction between deism and theism. He rejects what he calls anthropomorphism. We shouldn't think God actually has a brain or hands or gets angry like a human being. That's just dragging God down into the world of appearances and making him a big Superman.
But he accepts something called symbolic anthropomorphism.
Right. He uses a great analogy, but he flips it. He takes Paley's classic watchmaker analogy.
Okay, finding a watch on a beach implies a watchmaker. Classic.
But Kant uses it very differently, he says. We don't know the watchmaker himself. We don't know what he looks like or how he lives or what he eats for breakfast. We can only know the relationship. We know the existence and function of the watch depends on the maker. So we can use the watchmaker as a symbol to help us understand the origin of the watch without claiming to know anything at all about the nature of the maker himself.
So we can hold onto the concept of God as a kind of boundary stone for our reason. It marks the edge of what we can explain and gives a sense of unity.
Exactly. And this brings us right to the conclusion of the whole book, the final, subtle distinction between limits and bounds.
This is a subtle one. What's the difference between a limit and a bound?
A limit is just a negation. It's where something ends and there's nothing beyond it. He says mathematics has limits. It stops when you start talking about emotions, but it doesn't have a bound because math can go on forever within its own rules. You can always count higher. It just fizzles out when you leave its territory.
And a bound.
A bound is a positive edge. It's where one territory actively touches another territory. Philosophy, he says, leads us to the boundary of experience.
I love the image the text uses here. It feels very nautical.
It is. He says we stand at the edge of the island of truth, which is the domain of experience, science, and nature. It's a solid island. We can map it, we can build on it, we can farm it. But we look out from the shore at the vast, stormy ocean of the unknown, the noumena, the things in themselves.
And we can't sail that ocean. It's foggy and stormy, and we have no instruments for it.
No. We have no charts for it. Our tools, the categories like cause and substance, don't work out there. But, and this is his final point, standing at the boundary is incredibly valuable. It clearly defines the island. It keeps us from thinking the island is everything that exists, which would be a crude naturalism that denies anything spiritual. But it also keeps us from foolishly thinking the ocean is solid ground and trying to walk on it, which would be dogmatism, pretending we know the unknowable.
So the Prolegomena is really about mapping the shoreline. It's about saying, here is where science definitively ends. Here is where faith can reasonably begin. Do not mix them up.
Beautifully put. It's about knowing exactly where our powers end so that we can be completely secure in what we can know. It is, at its heart, a philosophy of profound intellectual humility.
All right, that is a heavy lifting. We have mapped the island. We have stared out at the ocean. Now, I want to have a little fun with this. We like to take these dense philosophical concepts and spin them out into our thought experiment segment.
Let's see if we can apply Kant's rigorous system to some properly outlandish sci-fi scenarios.
A disclaimer for everyone listening. The following scenarios are outlandish but plausible philosophical extrapolations inspired by the text. They are for entertainment and educational purposes only. I am ready. Test my transcendental idealism. Experiment number 1, the mirror universe encounter. This one is based directly on Kant's incongruent counterparts, the hand paradox we talked about earlier. So imagine a traveler finds a portal to a fourth physical dimension. He steps through, gets geometrically flipped over, and then returns to Earth.
Okay, so he's been mirrored, like looking in a mirror, but he is actually physically walking around that way.
Exactly. He looks the same to himself. His heart is still beating, all his memories are intact, but his left hand is now his right, and his heart is on the right side of his chest.
A medical nightmare, for starters.
He goes to shake hands with his best friend. He extends what he feels is his right hand, the one he writes with, but to his friend, it's a left hand. They can't clasp properly. It's physically awkward. The handshake fails.
And it would get much, much worse. So much worse, he tries to eat lunch. His enzymes, the very molecules in his body, are now mirrored. The amino acids in all food on Earth are left-handed in their chemical structure. His body is now built for right-handed amino acids. He can't digest the food. It might even be toxic to him. He could literally starve to death in a grocery store full of food.
This perfectly illustrates Kant's point, doesn't it? The internal relations of the man's body haven't changed. The distance from his heart to his hand is the same, but his relation to space itself has been reversed. It proves that space is an intuition we inhabit, not just a property of the object. If space were just a set of concepts, a mirrored man would be identical to a regular man. But in our actual intuition, they are fundamentally incompatible.
Experiment number 2, the permanent VR headset. This one is based on his idea of space and time as the forms of sensibility. So imagine humanity is born, and will always be born, wearing irremovable VR headsets. These headsets interpret all incoming data as 3D space and linear time. That's our operating system.
Okay, so that is our interface with reality. We are all living inside the matrix, so to speak. Now, we meet an alien species. They don't wear these headsets. Their minds process reality's raw data differently. Maybe they perceive it as a simultaneous web of intensity and potential. They don't have concepts like left or right, and they don't have before or after. Everything just is all at once for them.
Fascinating. A bit like the aliens in the movie Arrival.
Exactly. Yeah. So we try to teach them geometry. We draw a triangle in the sand. They simply cannot understand it. It's just noise, a meaningless shape. They can't see the angles of the lines because they don't have the space software running in their minds.
The philosophical point here is a chilling one. Are we the aliens in this scenario? Kant argues that we are wearing these headsets. We can never know if the underlying code of reality, the things in themselves, is spatial or temporal at all. We only know the display our minds generate. If we could somehow take the headset off, space and time as we know them would vanish. They belong to the headset, not the data stream. We are, in a way, trapped in our own format.
Which is terrifying, but also kind of cool. It means reality is much, much stranger than we can possibly think. Okay, final one. Experiment 3. The ghost in the machine. This is based on his solution to the third antinomy, freedom versus nature. A supercomputer is built, let's call it Laplace's demon, that can analyze every single atom in your body. It maps your neurons, your hormones, your entire history, even the air pressure on your skin.
Okay, so total physical determinism.
It uses this data to predict exactly what you will say next. It prints out a little card that reads, "Expert speaker will now say, but I feel like I'm choosing." And then 2 seconds later, you say it. It is 100% correct every single time. To the computer, you are nothing but a machine running a very complex script.
But I feel like I'm choosing.
Exactly. You still feel you made the choice freely. You deliberated. You thought about saying banana just to trick the machine, but then you decided against it for your own reasons.
And Kant's solution says that both are true.
How can they both be true? The computer predicted it perfectly.
Because they are looking from 2 different perspectives. To the computer, which is observing you as a phenomenon, an object in space and time, you are completely determined. You are just another link in the great chain of cause and effect. The prediction is valid because it's looking at the appearance of you from the outside. But to yourself, as a thing in itself, a noumenon, you exist outside of time. You are the source of the action. You are a free agent starting a new causal chain from a place science can't see. The contradiction is an illusion of perspective. The computer sees the outside story, which is nature. You live the inside story, which is freedom.
So we can be determined biological machines and free moral ghosts at the exact same time.
Depending on who is looking and from where.
I love that. I really do. It resolves so much of the tension between science and human experience. It lets me keep my science and keep my soul. So bringing it all back home, we have unpacked the Prolegomena. We have looked at the toolboxes, the boundaries, the antinomies. What is the final takeaway for the listener? Why should they care about this dense 200-year-old book?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this book isn't just about dry rules or logic games. It's fundamentally about humility. It's an exercise in intellectual humility. It marks the exact line between what we can know with certainty, which is science, the island of truth, and what we must believe or hope for in order to live a meaningful human life, which is morality and faith, the ocean surrounding us.
It saves science from becoming just meaningless habit, which is where Hume left it.
And it saves faith from becoming bad science, which is what the dogmatists were doing. It gives everything its proper protected place. It stops the fighting.
It's a peace treaty for the modern mind.
It is, and it's empowering too. It tells us that the order we see in the world isn't something external that enslaves us. It's something we actively contribute to. We are participants in the creation of our own reality.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to end on. If our mind prescribes the laws to nature, if we are the ones bringing space, time, and causality to the party? Are we discovering the universe? Or are we just discovering the architecture of our own minds?
That's the question that keeps you awake at night.
Thanks for listening to Talk Treatises.